What is going on, boys and girls? Welcome once again to the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. It's your boy Armando. I have a great episode for you today. As always, I got Rolando Nandin, who just won the Southeast Texas Kayak Bass League. I almost did the whole thing on one take. Southeast Texas Kayak Bass League. So he just won, and it's on Conroe. On Conroe, Texas. It's a great lake. First time he fished that lake, and we're going to be talking about his big win. Rolando Nandin, as some of you know, or most of you know, live in Texas. He is a local Texas hammer. I've had him last year on the podcast, and we talked a little bit about him going on national trails, and I've said it all along. I called it once this dude got into national trails. Everybody was going to remember his name. And on the national level, doing the Hobie BOS, the guy is slaying it. He already won the first event at the Hobie BOS at Toledo Bend. So both in the national trail and the local trails, this guy is a hammer and winning a bunch of checks and taking down a bunch of names. So it's always a pleasure to have him on the podcast. He's been on my podcast, I think, a couple of times. He's also been on the Reel Down a couple of times with some of his wins. So it's always a pleasure to have Rolando Nandin join us. If you ever fish with Rolando Nandin, you're going to be amazed at his knowledge. And the dude carries like 16 rods on a kayak. I'm sure he holds the world record for most rods on a kayak for bass fishing tournament. So, but I mean, the guy, proven that he knows what he's doing, both nationally and locally. As far as my week, kind of recording kind of late. It's Sunday. I had to go to Puerto Rico, last minute dentist appointment. I think it did some kind of major dental work done, and it was a lot cheaper to do it in Puerto Rico than it is to do it here. So just a quick fly over there, stay at my parents' house. Got there at midnight, then flew back the next day after the procedure was done. So kind of tired. I couldn't record earlier, so my apologies to Brian Schiller, our fearless CEO of Paddle and Fins. I'm turning this episode a little bit late for upload, but I'm sure he'll forgive me. Other than that, I am fishing Possum Kingdom with Jeremy McCormick. If you don't know Jeremy McCormick, go follow Jeremy McCormick. I think it's Jeremy McCormick Fishing on Instagram. Great dude. He's been a great supporter to my podcast. I've had the pleasure to fish with him, and he's a great dude. So go follow him, Jeremy McCormick Fishing on Instagram, something like that. But just follow Jeremy McCormick on Instagram. Look under Jeremy McCormick. You'll find a thumbnail with him holding a fish. So a great dude. And again, looking forward to putting some content out there for Instagram and social media. Hopefully we'll get to find those spots near those ramps where Mark Prendergraph was able to earn his nickname Possum King. So we'll see. Anyways, a big thank you to our sponsor, Douglas Rock. Go to douglasoutdoors.com. Check out the full lineup of LRS, X Matrix, and Fly Fishing Wow, I can't speak today. Fly Fishing Rods, award-winning fly fishing rods. Go check them out, douglasoutdoors.com. We'll go to a few waypoints commercial, then we'll bring Rolando Nandin right in. What is going on, my buddy?
Hey, what's going on, Armando?
It's a pleasure to have you again on the podcast. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time either with the success you've found throughout the last couple of years in kayak fishing, man. Congratulations on the Conroe trail down in Southeast Texas Kayak Bass League. How was it?
Appreciate it, Armando. Thank you for having me on. It was good. It was actually, it's one of those lakes, but it's first time on it, and being a recreational lake, it does make it a bit tough to bass fish around and all that. But nevertheless, I always love a challenge, and it makes it fun, So I did have a good time. Weather was a bit hot, so I don't do a lot of bass fishing in the summer, but I'm actually enjoying it because it's teaching me to, put those electronics to work,
Yeah, man, it's been crazy. Since the calendar turned to June, it's been like 100 degrees since the first week of June, like straight. I can't believe tomorrow's going to be the 27th, and we're going to be in the, I think, high 80s, low 90s. I was so excited to see that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I contact Jeremy McCormick and I'm like, dude, we gotta go fishing, man. May not see this day again until sometime September. But it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy because the last time I've seen summer this hot this early was about, I want to say 4 summers ago. And it was like May, we were hitting 100 degrees. And then when August came along, we were in the mid 90s, high 80s throughout most of August. So I'm crossing my fingers, hoping
Yeah.
August is going to be mild.
Yeah. Hopefully, hopefully it rolled in a little bit sooner, but it doesn't mean that it'll drag on, and maybe it'll cut out a little bit quicker there, the heat. But yeah, hopefully it does. We'll see.
Yeah, man, the fishing has been extremely tough as of late. But anyways, let's talk about your event, Conroe. You said your first time you're fishing is a recreational lake. Put the electronics to work. How did it play out for you? First of all, let's talk about pre-fishing. Did you get a chance to pre-fish this event?
Yeah, I did. Being the fact that I had never seen the lake, and I knew that I was going to be around a lot of boaters. There's always a lot of tournaments going on that event, so I understand it's a high pressured lake, plus all the recreational stuff, and the whole bottom end of the lake, pretty much from the mid lake down to the south, is all bulkheads, kind of like those seawalls. Mm-hmm. So it makes for a very bathtub type of feel, right, where the water is just shaking you around, where there's the energy of the waves are not dissipating off into the open land, right? So all that stuff bounces back, and it makes it hard to fish off of a kayak offshore because of all that moving. So I knew that I had to go in there and put some time into it. I wasn't going to be one of those going in blind and hope for the best. So I needed to find spots specifically that I could just go to, and I put in 2 practice days, 2 weekends before the event. And then I put 2 more practice, which is actually the most I've ever practiced for a tournament. And I put 2 more practice days right before the event, which was a Thursday and the Friday that they allow for the event. So I had 4 days total. Well, actually, it was 3.5 days total on that lake before the tournament that I had pre-fished. It wasn't the pre-fishing was better than the actual event, but more than anything else, I was able to mark stuff and kind of eliminate stuff that I didn't want to see. But you have to be careful pre-fishing on a kayak. You don't have the luxury. You don't want to get spread out too much. And I'm kind of learning that still, where I don't want to pre-fish too many spots, and then you get all scatterbrained of where you want to go fish, because I kind of felt that way because I had some good spots down south. But my 2 days before the event, I practiced and had a pretty decent feel for the mid-lake section, and I was kind of cross between the two. So, but since I had more offshore spots marked on mid-section of the lake, that ended up being my go-to area for tournament day.
Yeah, I think on lakes like that, and I really struggle on those types of lakes, to be honest with you, more of a grass, creek kind of lake or style of fishing, but you really do need pre-fishing, because I mean, when you're fishing open water, especially on summer, do you remember what the water temperatures were for the tournament?
Yeah. So the water, when I rolled out that morning, it was 87 at the ramp, and then throughout the day, it got up to in the area that I was in, it got up to about 91, I think it was.
Wow.
But there's creeks and arms that go off on there that were as high as 95, 96 degrees, and those
water temperature,
because the further north you went on the lake, the more stained the water was, and it was just holding more heat, the water, especially on those backwater areas. So I did talk to some people that saw mid 90s in some of that water up there.
That is crazy, man. When you think about that, it's like 95, 90. And it's Conroe, I've never fished there. Is it like Clearwater Lake where you were fishing? I'm assuming going, down further south, a lot of rocky lakes.
Actually, it had a little green stain to it. I'd probably say it had about probably 2 feet of visibility, 2.5 feet, maybe 2 feet, I think, in the mid lake, right? So from south all the way up, I think it's about 2 feet. Once there's an area once you get cross up to the north where it gets real tannic, kind of that brownish tint.
Yep.
It wasn't bad. I mean, for me, that's really good clarity water because it's not too clear and it's not too dirty. So you get away with a lot of different styles of fishing in that clarity. So I thought it was I like that clarity type of water.
On the pre-fishing, did you at any point focus on creeks, or were you just like when you pre-fish, you saw the water temperature, you were like, okay, this is going to be offshore, nothing?
Yeah, the first day when I got there, the water was cooler, which was 2 weeks before that, and I had fished the south end. I had already pretty much wanted to say that I had committed to offshore because I knew I went in and I tried the shallow game and it just wasn't happening for me. And then I went offshore and I caught a few bass that were pretty decent size. And I was thinking, okay, that 15-foot range is where I'm finding the quality size. I did find some fish shallow, but they were not quality. So I feel like it was a timing deal, right? Because those smaller fish will rush the morning that shallow. The big fish will also go up there shallow in the morning, but you got to time it right. And I felt like there's not a lot of ramps at that lake, so they're gonna fish a lot of times on top of each other. And I knew that for me, that shallow bite was gonna be a lot of what options the people were gonna do in the morning. And to put 5 big fish together in the morning shallow, I just felt like there was too many of us competing for those fish in the morning, where I felt like I was going to be more consistent offshore. And practice always, sometimes I feel like during the week, especially on a lake like that, you don't have the recreational a lot. So you feel a little more comfortable fishing on Thursday and Friday, and things can seem a bit promising on Thursday and Fridays, but then weekends come and you have all these jet skis and boats and things. I felt like it shut the bite down. And places like that are deceiving because you practice good and that Thursday and Friday, and then Saturday comes and you got like double the amount of people that are recreational. And then on top of that, you have all the anglers, right, that are competing. In this case, it was 75, but you also had boat tournaments. So I just didn't feel confident going in on a summer type of field day and the water temps being in the high 80s to low 90s. I was like, man, I feel like I'll put my electronics and probably be a little more consistent offshore than I am trying to run behind someone, finessing things. But it works for some people. And I just think that it's more of a timing deal for that, which offshore is a timing deal as well. Yeah. But I feel like I have to compete less for fish offshore. In the kayak scene, maybe in the boat scene, it may be a little bit different. I think a lot of more people start now, getting over to the offshore game more because of the electronics. But not everybody has mastered the whole electronics on the kayak, because it's always you're moving, you're rocking. It's hard to stay online with your cast to hit the right exact points. So there's a little more challenge on the offshore game on a kayak versus a boat. And I feel like to me, I'm trying to master that a bit more because I feel like I compete less for fish that way.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like a solid game plan. Let me ask you this before we actually get into the tournament. As far as pre-fishing goes, what lures worked for you and what lures didn't work for you in pre-fishing?
In pre-fishing, I caught fish on a jig, of course, in rocky areas, on the million docks that there are there. I also fished, what was it? Trying to remember what I caught them in pre-fishing, because it was the 2 weekends before. It wasn't a shaky head. It was a crankbait, a deep diving crankbait, a jig, and
how deep was the crankbait?
It was a deep diver. It was one of the 6X, no, not 10XDs. I was getting it down pretty deep. I also was throwing a mega bass, what they call a deep six, which I can get it to about 19 feet of water. I caught on that one as well, the jig and the Texas rig. Um, and that's pretty much it. I think those were pretty much my dominant fish catchers. I carry 16 rods, so
Yeah.
I usually have a ton of rods, and sometimes I don't even touch half of them, right? But I run into a scenario and I don't have to think about
Yeah.
what to do. It's there, right? I already have it pre-rigged for backup. So I do throw a lot of power fishing type of lures, and I'll resort to finesse if nothing else, if the power fishing is not working. So I tried my jerk bait. I didn't catch any fish on my jerk bait in practice, and I ended up actually catching. And I can tell you later if we get to that. My actual winning fish that actually put me over was on a jerk bait.
And that was a beast too. We'll talk a little bit
Well,
about
yeah,
that one.
yeah.
So when you got to tournament day, you already had picked out your spot. Did you have to move a lot? Did you have to switch from plan A or spot A to spot B to spot C, or was it working as you had planned as far as your first spot, your second spot, third spot?
This is tournament day we're talking about.
Yeah, tournament day.
Yeah, tournament day. I stayed in the house with a couple of the guys that Jeremiah, Glenny, Carlos Estrada, Clint. They all stayed with us, and we all kind of, you hear that doc talk, right? Everybody's catching them certain ways, and I try to not. I listen if people are saying things, but I try not to go into that stuff. But on Friday, I struggled a little bit offshore, and I was hearing, there was good fish on the shallow bank. So I decided tournament day to start shallow, and I said, okay, if I run a good stretch and just see what I can do and pick off a few just to get the pressure off and get that closer to the limit, I can move out to my offshore game later. But even though it seems I had the right plan, man, that morning I ran a long a bank all the way to my first point that I wanted to fish, and I only had 2 fish to show for by 10 o'clock, and they were not very big. It was a 12 and 3/4 and a 16 and some change. And man, I was fishing behind one other guy. So I decided to go a little bit more finesse since he was throwing a different presentation, a popper or something. And I was throwing a floating worm is what I was throwing in the morning. I had started off with a buzzbait, but they weren't biting it. So I tried to go a little more finesse, finally picked 2 off with a floating worm, and then didn't catch nothing for hours. And then I realized like 10 o'clock, I was like, man, this is not looking good. And then I turned a point. By the time I got to where I wanted to fish, where I had a bunch, I don't know, I probably had about 7 areas offshore marked. I turned the corner, and there's literally, I think I counted 7 people on that point. And that was a combination of kayaks and boats. And I was like, man, every spot that I kind of marked in that area, I couldn't get to it because there was a boat nearby it or fishing it or things like that. So I continue my offshore kind of looking around there to see if there was anything I can pick off. And I ended up spending, I don't know, close to 30 minutes looking around there and didn't catch anything. I went back shallow for a little bit. And then as soon as I saw a boat leave that was on my spot, I went in right behind them and I caught 1 fish behind them offshore. Didn't get a single bite after that. Then I ended up checking all those spots. Eventually, everybody kind of shifted around and moved, and I went behind checking everything. I couldn't find anything offshore there. And then I went back shallow and gave it an hour. I came right back out, and I said, let me check one more time before I make a longer run and get out of this area. And that's where I kind of found that spot that I had marked, and it wasn't my actual waypoint. It was a little bit off of it, and I found this little rock pile, and I cast out there my shaky head, and I felt it, and I could feel the rock down below. It felt like you were dragging across concrete. And I said, man, it's got bait around. I can't see any fish on it, but I see activity all around it, and maybe these fish are just hugging the bottom, and I can't see them, which is sometimes typical in the summer, right?
Yeah.
Sure enough, I feel a little thump, and I set the hook, and it's a 16. Land that one. I throw back out. I don't know if it was 2 casts later or 3 casts later. I throw it back in the same spot. That's where I caught my big one. My big one was actually off a shaky head. And I didn't even feel her bite. I literally was dragging it. I'm feeling the rock. And all of a sudden, I feel like no more rock. And then I feel weight. And it's just like I'm pulling it very slowly. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a bite or not, but I'm, hook sets are free. So I'm going to swing at it. I swing at it and it just stops, right? And for a second there, it stopped so hard that I was like, man, I don't know if I'm stuck. But then I felt it come right back down. And I was like, oh, that's a fish. And there was her. And I actually caught her. That was not, obviously that made a lot of inches up for my day. But the true winning fish was actually a smaller fish than that, because I caught it with 2 minutes left. Caught a little 15 3/4, which replaced my 13 3/4 fish.
Wow. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So even though this fish was actually the most contributing fish to the entire event, right, because of the inches, I was still behind and probably in second place, probably around that 88 inches range, because I had a 13 3/4 fish because they allowed 12 inches on this tournament.
Yeah.
With 6 minutes left, I was fishing a rock bridge, and there was people fishing off the bridge, so it wasn't very good. I decided to make a quick run, and this is a lesson to everybody: is fish to the last minute. You know what I mean? Because I literally could have just said, you know what, let me just pack it up. I got 6 minutes left. Let's just make my way back and let the chips fall where they fall. But I decided to go fish a bridge pylon, and I ended up catching a 15 and a half or 15 3/4 that replaced my 13. And those 2 inches got me to the 90-inch mark, which put me a 1/4 of an inch ahead of the leader. And that's how I ended up winning the tournament, because of that 15-inch fish.
Yeah, this is a big one. I mean, you got almost 25. This is what? 25 inches. You almost like 25 and a half, right?
Yep, it's 25 and a half. Yep.
So for those out listening on the podcast, we have this running also in our Facebook Paddle and Fin and YouTube channel Paddle and Fin. So we're sharing the screen here, and it is definitely a monster. It's almost as big as the board, 26-inch board. It's just half an inch shy of it. So this is a monster fish, man. Congratulations. Hooking into that thing, it's amazing. She ended up with 25 and a half, 16 and quarter, 63 16 and a quarter, and 15 and 3/4. Total was 8 fish. Obviously the top 5 count. Did you actually just caught 8 fish, or were there more that?
I think there was only 2 more that were undersized that didn't make the coal. They were like 11 inchers, I think, or 10 incher. So it wasn't very many fish caught.
I think the top 14 got.
I think if you look at that, there was barely anybody cold more than 2 fish. I don't even think anybody cold anything. Yeah. It was shocking, because practice weekends before the event, I mean, people were catching 100-inch bags, right? So people were going out there doing really well 2 weeks before the event, and then even 2 days before the event, there was some good fish caught. And then all of a sudden, Saturday comes around, and it's like these fish know, like, hey, we're gonna have to back off on the feeding here, because here comes all the anglers, trying to fish for us or something. Man, we'll never know, of course, right? But I feel like sometimes there's something to it, man. Fishing the weekends, it just feels sometimes like it gets harder, than during the week. And that was, this event, I felt like kind of showcased that a bit, because there was good fish caught in practice, and then all of a sudden everybody was struggling on all ends of the lake.
Would they all came out on the shaky head, or the top 5?
So I caught 4 on the shaky head, and my last one that I caught that replaced the 13, which was a 15 3/4, that came off a jerkbait.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep, that one. Yep, that one came off jerkbait. But I had a lot of baits with me, and a lot of the stuff wasn't the stuff that I actually had caught. So I was using a technique on Thursday and Friday. That's a Texas rig. Free. There's a little free weight that kind of slides up and down, and I caught fish using the. I think they call it the free rig. I think they call it. I caught fish like that, and then tournament day, I couldn't even get a bite on it. But I will tell you that they like pumpkin on that color on that lake, so it was a good, switch that I did to that color, and it helped because I did catch fish. I did catch a fish on the Texas rig, and I actually caught 3 fish on the Texas rig, but only 1 kept. The other ones were too short.
What was the soft plastic of Texas rig? Like worm? Cinco?
It was a power curly tail worm, pumpkin color. Nice. Sometimes color does play a role. It's not a big factor for me, but sometimes it is, right? Yeah. It's just not every tournament or every lake you could say that, but there is times where I feel like that color just gives you that little extra, 1 or 2 more bites that you needed.
Yeah, I think so, and especially I think when they're feeding on something specific, I think that's where matching the hatch really comes into effect. That's my opinion. Like I said, I'm no marine biologist or.
Yeah, I mean we don't know either.
We don't know, but I do feel like whenever if they're feeding on shad, I feel like what's gonna give you the best is just throwing something that looks as much of the shad as you can, But again, I've had different opinions. You can ask 5 different anglers what their opinion is on colors. You might get 5 different answers based on their experience, but it all depends on the lake and time of year too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All of that plays into it. One of the things you have to understand going into Conroe, it has the forage is there's a lot of bluegill and tons of it. And when if you have live scope, you'll see these schools of they look big. Sometimes you mistake. I mean, these bluegill get really, really big. But you'll see if you fish underneath those schools, the bass tend to stay underneath them. And I made a last minute decision to go to the shaky head because I was like, you know what? I haven't fished it all tournament or all practice, and it's a finesse technique. And the summer, I could get it down there pretty quick and get it underneath those schools because they were hovering right above, the bottom there. And I was like, those bass like to just kind of roam underneath those schools. And I was like, I'll just hope that, one of them hears it or sees it since I was on rock. And I just kept moving it. And it worked out because, as a matter of fact, when I was fishing that spot, I don't know, I probably had about 4 kayaks around me. Nobody caught a single fish around me that I saw, right? But it was very specific where you had to cast because they were just really on those little hard spots. If you were just a little off of it, your lure would probably get lost. Probably wouldn't get a good, the fact that I was dragging it on those rocks, you probably hear the little ticking down there, right? And it was really important to fish it slow so that you give them time to find it, So that's what I did. I was sitting out there kind of moving it, but the cast had to be very precise because you didn't have a lot of time to cast over your target. By the time, if you took too long, the waves and all the activity around you would get blown off your spot. And by the time you try to drag into that, you're off of it and you miss your target. So I did notice that if I didn't cast very specific and got on that little rock bottom where I could feel the rock, I wasn't going to get a bite. I wasn't getting any bites. So I had to cast very precise where they were kind of honing into that little area.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was just about to go into that and ask you about that. So first of all, based on the circumstances that you have, and to remind the audience that's listening, circumstances are you're on bluff walls where the waves is not scattering, it's just bouncing off and bouncing, therefore bouncing you back and forth, side to side. I know it's been windy since the calendar turned to 2022, it seems like it's been windy every day. How windy was it that day?
No, it wasn't very windy at all. Yeah, it was very calm wind. We had a small breeze in the morning, and it looked very promising in the morning, but the wind pretty much died down, and it was, it doesn't even matter because if you're that lake specifically, it didn't matter because I fished that lake on a windy day, and when there's that much boat activity, it pretty much feels windy because you have waves coming from all directions. And if it's windy, it just amplifies it, but not to the extent where it's that much worse. That lake on the bottom end, I've never fished a lake where it literally feels like a bathtub, that's just shaking it back and forth. So it's really hard to stay on your spot because you're kind of bouncing around. And, if it is windy, it's just a little extra layer of difficult that it adds to it. But that day was kind of calm, bluebird skies. It didn't feel calm, right, because of the activity around us, jet skis and boats. I'm sure some people out there had stories about almost getting run over because there was times where I played chicken with some people and I'm like, all right, guy, like, which way are you going,
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So, and I really wanted to hit on that because I know that's something I struggle with. And I know a lot, when you have the physical element of trying to stay in your spot with wind, with waves and traffic and all that, how are you able? You say you cast precisely. So how are you able to cast precisely? Now, my thought is you go to a heavier ounce weight to get it down quicker. What do you do to make sure you're casting it precisely?
Yeah. So one of the things that contributes to my success being able to fish offshore is the 360 capability. Yeah. That you don't absolutely need that, of course, but it helps. Obviously, if you have spot lock and you have a front motor spot lock, that's awesome, right? But if you don't have that, you kind of have to feel there's a rhythm to things out there, right? You tend to know which way you're kind of gravitate to based on what the conditions are. So I normally, and obviously having live scope assist a lot, right? Because I'm able to see my lure go down, and then I have a visual of my line. I visualize my line, and I do sometimes either you have the live scope to tell you where it's at, right? Because you can see it, right? If you don't have the live scope and you have a marker on the background where you could see that you're lined up with something and you make a cast. And yes, if you have you need a heavier weight, especially in those conditions, so that it can get down quick enough, right? So you don't lose that time of the rate of fall. By the time it gets down there, you get shifted over. But you have to anticipate your cast. So if I know that I'm drifting to my left, then I will cast a little bit off to the right of my target, because I know by the time I drag that in there, I'll be lined up to get it across through the target that I'm looking at, right? Because we don't have the luxury of a spot lock in some cases, or a boat where you can stay on the exact spot. So on a kayak, you have to anticipate your trajectory, so to speak. So you would cast off, if you know you're drifting to the left, you cast off a little bit to the right of it. And then that way my angle, right, doesn't put my lure when I'm dragging it too far over to the left where I miss my target. So you cast, you get in there, you feel that you get in there, and you got to get down there quickly so that you know you don't lose that time, and you just drag it. You don't always hit it. You can't be perfect every time because you have all these other elements that are working against you when you're on the kayak. But if you can get it in there, just maximize the time in that strike zone and try not to pull it off too quickly. And it's a challenge. At the end of the day, when you have that many things working against you and you're moving, you have to visualize that trajectory of that cast to get it on there. Obviously, having the electronics that assist with that makes it easier, right? But if you don't have the electronics, it's still possible. Always, too, you want to head, in our case, you want to have the wind in front of you, right? Headwind. Yeah. so that you cast towards the wind. And if you need to stay on it, you're more likely to stay on it like that. But in conditions like that, where you're getting rocked left and right, sometimes you have a little bit of wind. Eventually, you're drifting off to one side more than the other, and you have to kind of, compensate for that. Don't cast too far over your target where it takes too long to drag into your target zone, right? Because then by the time you drift off, you're pulling your line on the other side of the target and you're missing your spot. But I've learned that using the live scope, it's not so much to see the fish bite your lure, but what I've really enjoyed about that is that I can see where they're positioned and I can see their reaction. So I know what they want, or if they're 5 feet off the bottom, 3 feet off the bottom, so I can adjust my approach with that. It's not so much that, you can see the bait and you can see him strike it, because really that doesn't help you. If anything, that just makes you waste more time, than anything else. So if you got the money, obviously the live scope, you want to get it, right? Because it'll help you eliminate that guessing part. But someone that has years of experience fishing offshore and doesn't have those electronics can easily do what I'm doing by using your background, right? What you can look at. And then also, you have buoys that you can use if you want to throw a buoy out there and mark your spot. That would be the most efficient way if you're going to spend a long time on a spot. And then, and of course, if you don't have a 360, having a short paddle to adjust yourself really quickly as opposed to a big paddle, a short paddle will help you realign your nose very quickly, and then you put it back in your kayak. The 360, you don't need to do that, because I can literally turn my pedals to the right and I can shift my nose right back into position.
And let me ask you this, do you ever, in this case, did you ever use at any point consider using a weight, an anchor, I should say?
Yeah. I probably should. I just don't like it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah, I just don't. I haven't found that comfort with it, or that, that comfort, or I haven't experienced with it enough. I've used it a couple of times in the beginning, and I just not a big fan of it. Having the 360, I can stay enough in my zone where I don't need to have that so much. It's definitely more work doing it that way, because if you anchor yourself and you know that you're going to fish a spot for 30 minutes or so, it's probably more efficient to drop an anchor and do it. I've heard that a dumbbell, that you work out with, works best for that, versus actually getting the ones that are the spikes kind of opened up. But I haven't done it, man. I have one there. I take it with me all the time in my truck. I just can't find myself to actually load it up on the kayak. So I gotta I'll probably do that and experiment with it to see if it actually will make me more efficient when I'm doing that. But I've yet to really kind of test it out.
Yeah, it seems like you and I are kind of like think along the same lines. The only thing is I don't catch them, you do. But it's the same thing.
No.
The anchor is always on the trunk of my pickup, but what was it, half the time I don't even load it on the kayak.
Yeah.
I think the main difference is in going a little bit about, and this is more for the listeners, right? Trying to visualize. Well, if you're in open water, how do you use your background? And the first thought to me is, if you're looking from the shore to the open lake and you don't have a background because the lake is like the coast is
too far,
hard, then you have to move to the other side at that point and look at from the mid lake towards the shore to the bank, and then you can more precisely get a visual background and a visual marker on your mind. It's there's a certain tree that sticks out, is like, if I align it around this tree, kind of thing. Now the point is where the wind is coming from. So when it's hitting you on the back, then it's going to be a lot harder. And I think that's where that's where the anchor comes in, because and again, this is a very specific scenario, but let's just say you found a spot. You don't have the light scope, but you found a spot using your side imaging.
Side scan.
It's side scanning, right? And you see this spot and you want to stay on point. You look from the bank towards the mid lake, and there's no background reference, right? So you're thinking, okay, so let me go on the other side and look from the mid lake to the bank. And now I have my reference point, but the wind is behind me. So how do I stay? That's where you're going to throw in your anchor and say, okay, then I can anchor in. And now I don't have to worry about having the wind on my back, because the anchor is going to hold you there. Kind of, depending, if it's hits you sideways, and that's a whole nother problem.
Yeah.
So it's very specific scenarios, but there is a use to it. It is.
Yeah, there's
it's one of those intricacies that it's always going to be there.
There's little tricks to things, right? For example, you don't want to do the weight. You don't have a background. You mark the exact waypoint. You can also align yourself. When you have a waypoint, you already know where it's at, right? Because you have your GPS maps, right? If you have a unit that has your maps and also has your navigational stuff, right, where you can actually see what the nose of your kayak is pointing, you'll probably want to get a like some sort of heading sensor or a GPS tracking deal, right? Because that'll give you instant feedback, right, of where your nose is at. What you could always do is you can mark your waypoint. You can align yourself really quickly and make a cast, and you say, okay, there it is. I know it's there, but I don't have enough time, a lot of time to do it. But if you can drop another waypoint on your position between the actual spot and where your kayak sits. You drop another waypoint, but you edit it, right? You can edit to where it's a different icon so that you don't confuse the two. And what that do is it gives you a reference. It gives you a line, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can actually line yourself up. And when you actually cast, you know where your lure ends up. And if you're dragging it in there and you look to your GPS maps and you see that you've drifted off your initial mark that you drop of your location, that's going to give you your reference of where you are from your actual waypoint, because you're like, oh shoot, I drifted off to the side of it already. So I know that I'm no longer lined up with it, because if you don't have a reference, you don't even know if you're drifting, right? Yeah. You just feel a movement, right? So there's little tricks that you can use on your maps, to like, for example, if you're marking waypoints on spots that are very big, right? Like big brush piles, like you can mark several ends of it, right? The left side and the right side of it. So it shows you how wide that brush pile is. Yeah. And as far as length too. So there's little tricks to use your waypoints to assist you in all of that, right? It's not very efficient. It's efficient if you're good with your electronics and you know how to drop waypoints real quick. More so if you have touchscreen. If you don't have touchscreen, that's too much trouble. Yeah. Because you got to go into your menus and you got to do all this stuff. So the touchscreen obviously assists with that efficiency.
And I think Garmin, and I haven't used it that much. I do the touchscreen to mark a waypoint, but it does have that little, I forgot the name of that tool. That's old navigation tool where it's kind of like 2 points, like a scissor. Looks like a scissor, but it's not.
You're talking about the oh gosh, where you drop a pin, so to speak, and it tells you it's
a geometry tool. I remember.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Actually, the Garmin does have that, and I have it, but I have to learn how to use it.
Yeah,
I have to learn how to use it.
I'm pretty sure there's other features on my Garmin too that I just haven't played with. I mean, those units are really efficient if you give. Yeah. You just put a little time into it and you figure out little things that you can do on it to help you throughout the day on offshore stuff.
That's the thing about it, though. It's like, there's a few things that I've learned throughout the years of fishing, and I'm not by any means at the same level you are, but slowly learning. And something maybe that listeners can relate to what I'm saying is you have to we all want to go on the water and spend time on the water. That's the best time. But you have to actually sacrifice some of that time to learn your electronics and do your research on it. At the end, it pays off. Like, screwing around with electronics is not fun.
No,
And
yeah,
sometimes you're like, I just want to fish. I just want to catch fish.
yep,
And if
yep,
that's all you want to do, that's fine. But when you also fish in tournaments and you want to be successful in tournament to kind of justify the fees, the gas, and all that, then you have to invest a little bit, even though it's not the most enjoyable thing. And it kind of sometimes feel like it's a waste of time. I could be casting right now, but I'm fiddling with this electronic that I don't understand.
yep,
You have to put in the time. I mean, you have, some of those electronics went from 300 to 3,000, and
right,
if you're not in, mostly other than the kayak, probably, and in some cases, even more expensive than the kayak that you have. And yet you're not taking time out to really figure out how you can really take full advantage on it. And one
right,
thing that I wanted to hit on, because a lot of times, you have to understand, kind of have self awareness of what you want to get out of each tournament. Like right now, gas prices all time high. Yet
mm-hmm,
you went to a lake where I'm assuming it's not even close because you say you stayed at a house and
yeah,
you went to pre-fish it 4 times. I'm just gonna say you spend more than $200 in gases
oh yeah,
just
mm-hmm,
between pre-fish and going to tournament.
yep,
You spend more than $200 in it. That's not counting the lunch that you had to buy, the drinks, the Airbnb and all that. But you put in the work, and therefore you got the reward of winning first place and catching the check. You see, there's got to be a little bit of give and take. You just can't show up in the tournament and think that you consistently are going to catch in a check all the time. And I say that not to you, but those out there
yeah,
listening sometimes get frustrated with the results of the tournament, and I often do. But that's one of the things that you have to think about. You can't expect to win a tournament against some of the top anglers. You're not putting in the work and making sacrifices. Now, the sacrifices that sometimes you have to do, for in your case, maybe not everybody can spend $200 and pay $200 in
mm-hmm.
gas to pre-fish a tournament. But you have to understand that, well, that's going to put you behind the 8 ball when you know there's people out there that actually, like yourself, are doing that to win it with all your rights. That's you can't you get what you put in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you do tournament fishing, I mean, we're all doing it because we have some sort of competitiveness, right?
Yeah.
We enjoy it. We're certainly, I don't, we're not doing it necessarily for the money, because really it's just there's not enough there to get rich, right?
Yeah.
So we really enjoy it, and the camaraderie that comes with it. And when you get out there, and if you there's a state of mind that you have to reach, right, to really put a dent in the game, so to speak. Naturally, I've always been real competitive growing up, and I was always a smaller guy, right? And the smaller guys always have to have, they're
Work the
always
hardest.
yeah, they have to work the hardest, right? Because you have to earn it, right? It's not something. But the thing is that, like, what I notice is that if when you go into these tournaments, obviously spending time on the water contributes to that success. But it's a lot. There's more to it than just saying that, because there's you can spend a lot of time on the water, but it does you no good to spend a lot of time on the water if you go every time and you're just trying to catch fish with no understanding of the conditions, the forage, the time of year, right? There's a lot of variables that are coming into play that you're going to have to anticipate, right? You go out there to get awareness of your surroundings, to get awareness of what the fish are doing, that, what they're relating to, understand what's down there in the water. Going out there every day of the week, but not opening your eyes and your ears to what's going on around you is not going to do you any good, because you're so focused on trying to get bites that every day things change. And if you're focused on getting bites, you're literally not going to be able to adapt to the conditions. and so that you're not understanding what's going on around you for that given lake. So I hear the term all the time, right? Time on the water, time on the water. Absolutely true, time on the water. But there's another aspect to that, another layer to that, that you have to incorporate into all of that to really make that work, right? And so obviously today's world, electronics is a big player, right? That contributes to that success. If you get an angler, John Cox, obviously that's a shallow fisherman. He fishes year round. He's not winning every single tournament. He obviously does very well fishing with no electronics and just, sticking to the shallow game. But you also have to remember that when we watch these pros, they fish every year the same best prime time, which is spring. Where are all the fish in spring? You get away with not having to use electronics in the spring because we know what the fish are doing in the spring. But when you become a more well-rounded angler where you understand how to fish shallow, but then you incorporate your electronic game and you step that up, and then you're also understand what the species does given with the conditions, the environment, the type of lake, the area of the country that you're fishing. You add all of that to that, you will find yourself more consistently cashing a check because you're not just going for bites and you're not just swinging a jackhammer because Johnny last week was crushing it on a jackhammer or a buzzbait, right? You go out there because you know that what these fish are relating to and what they're eating based on your observation. So yeah, you got to put definitely time in to compete at a higher level because we all go through it, right? There was times where I would go to these tournaments when I started locally and I was like, I don't understand how they're catching big fish all the time. And that's because I was just going out and just chunking and whining at the bank, right? And that works in the spring most of the time. But, some lakes, that's not going to work for you. So you gotta have that balance of things, and you'll find yourself catching a check more often when you put the time in to understanding the sport as a whole, right? From the shallow to the deep. The problem with that, though, is that you have to have patience because you have to understand that you're going to suck sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can't win every tournament, right? So, and fish, it's not like we talk about patterning fish, right? But unfortunately, they're living things, and that any time they can change what they do. And they don't read the same books we do, right?
Yeah.
So we're not always catching on the same things. And that's what makes this sport so much fun, is that you have to be thinking on your toes all the time just to get that next bite, right? For all the watchers and viewers, you hear the term, time on the water. Absolutely put the time on the water, but also, take the time to read about the species, what they do, understand the bass, their habits, what they feed on, and then you'll start not caring about catching fish, and you'll start more about taking in that intel of what's provided that day for you for the tournament day. Because for us at Conroe, 2 days fishing, I caught them on completely different things on tournament day, and it was just they weren't biting on anything that I was catching them on. So you have to be able to adjust to that.
Yeah, and it comes down to when you're on the water. And my mom used to tell me this a lot. He says, "You're hearing, but you're not listening."
Yeah, we all done it.
You're seeing, but you're not watching.
You're right.
And it's kind of those things where you have to have that kind of like awareness of what's going on, not just get the visual aspect of it, but just the whole picture.
And one other thing that gets overlooked is your state of mind, right? Mm-hmm. Is you have to be confident, and you can't worry too much about what other people are doing, because if you pay attention and you try to, I don't want to use the word copy, but you tend to do what you're hearing, what's going on, you're not opening your eyes to what the situation is. You have to train your mind to be confident in what you choose to do. And if you chose something that didn't work, you got to learn from it, right? That day, it was cloudy. There was no wind. And I chose to throw stuff that I heard was biting the day before from the dock talk. Analyze that, right? And actually take it and figure out, could I have done something different, right? Hindsight 2020, we always, talk about that. But I feel like we just listen, right? Or we hear, in other words, and we're not really listening to what and we don't adapt to that stuff. But I actually said, going into this tournament, I said, man, I feel good about it. Like, I know what I'm going to go do. And if it doesn't work, then I can always resort to beating the docks and just running a strip of docks, right? That's all I can do, and just hope for the best. But when you're confident mentally going into it, I feel like you fish every second very, very competitively, as opposed to you're tired, you don't get enough sleep, and you just go in there and say, I hope I figure it out. Then when you got 6 minutes left, you're not too worried about making one more cast, right, to catch that one fish that put me over to help me. I feel like mentally, if you're going to compete and you're going to want to fish at a higher level, mentally you gotta want it. You gotta believe that you can go in there and beat these guys, even though you don't have the experience they have. But that's another aspect I think that gets overlooked, because sometimes I feel like we go out and we just kind of want to have fun. And I know, and obviously we want to have fun, right? But we're also competing because you want to win, I would imagine. Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel. I feel like when I want to go, I want to win, but I got to believe that I can win too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, the mental aspect is, it's half the battle. You can lose the tournament before lines in.
Yeah.
You can't win a tournament before lines in, but you can definitely lose a tournament before lines in. And then,
absolutely.
And that comes down to the mental aspect of it. Looking towards the rest of the season, let's talk a little bit about let's stick with the Southeast Texas Kayak Bass League. You're in the running. I'm assuming you got to be either in the top 3 or 5 in the Angler of the Year race.
I'm 3 points behind. Yeah, I'm behind. I'm 3 points behind Jeff Isham in first place. So I'm sitting in second place for Angler of the Year.
Oh, Dreadlock himself is first place. Nice.
Yeah,
great dude, by the way. Great dude.
Oh yeah, he is a good guy.
And how many trails do you have left on the Southeast Texas Kayak? 3 points is nothing, by the way.
Yeah, it's over. And the Angler of the Year is carrying into the Classic, so we actually have to fish for it. So it will come down to the Lake Fork event Classic that we have in September, which is right after Dardanelle. I think it's nice. Literally the weekend. It's a weekend after Dardanelle when we get back that we'll be fishing Lake Fork. So that will depend on the Angler of the Year. See who gets it. Either there's at least 5 of us, I think, that are, or 6 of us that are, depending on how we end up, could make it. Any of those 5 or 8 people can take it.
And then, so as far as the regular season is gone for the Southeast Texas Kayak Bass League, just that one event, the Classic, and I'm assuming it's the top 50 like most, or is it open? It's not an open, right?
No, it's not an open. I want to say they're gonna make it. They're gonna roll in about 70 spots into it, I think, just to increase the pot. I think originally it was supposed to be 50, but I think they're doing it up to 70. They had lowered the entry fees due to the economy, right? So I think to make it more interesting and a bigger pot, they're going to roll it down 20 more spots.
Look good, man.
But normally it's 50.
Yeah. Chris Morales. I was going to say Chris Delgado. Slim now. Chris Morales is the one who runs the Southeast Texas Kayak Bass League. And he does a phenomenal job. I mean, we're lucky to have him here in Texas. Him and Duke Tran, 2 of my favorite local tournament directors here. And there's other great tournament directors. There's a whole bunch of trails here. But I mean, I really have a lot of respect for what Chris Morales is doing and Duke Tran is doing. There's a reason why the Southeast Texas Kayak Bass League got to be the most populated or the highest attendance, I would think, of all the
Yeah, it
tournaments
is.
out here. And that's
In the
big
central
reason
and
is
south,
Chris. Yeah,
yeah, central and south, it is usually. They usually get anywhere from 70 to 80 people, so it's usually
yeah.
pretty good
So,
turnout.
and a lot of great hammers too. Caleb Helbig, Jeff Isham. I mean, the list goes on and on. Andrew Jacobs. I,
Hmm.
I feel like I'm disrespecting a whole lot of them, but just mentioning a couple of names. But you know who you are, and honestly, in top 50 on that one, top 70. He's a great angler um, anywhere. Moving on to
Yeah,
the national trail. So you've really focused on Hobie BOS. You won one tournament, and how many have you fished? You're gonna do this three, right? The Toledo, Broken Bow, and Darnell. Is that correct? Or you have a couple
yeah.
more?
Those are the only three that I'm doing. Right. I fished Toledo, and then I fished Broken Bow, and then I'm gonna do Dardanelle. I was hoping that I
What
do get better finish in Broken Bow, but it turned out to be a little bit tougher for me than I expected. So
Well, you did punch your ticket to the TOC. What place did you ended up on Broken Bow? Remind me again, like 40 something I think it was.
30,
Oh, 30,
30 is something. Yeah,
30 something. Yeah, that was crazy.
36.
It's like
Yeah,
4 inches
yeah,
will
that.
drop you from 1 to like 20th.
Yeah, man, it was so tight all the way through there. Yeah, I think if I would have just caught one 18-incher, it would have moved me like, I don't know, like 15 spots or something. It's just crazy how tight it was. But it's the way it goes. Broken Bow was actually I really enjoyed fishing it. Actually, it was kind
Beautiful
of a
lake, by
fun
the way.
lake. Yeah.
Beautiful
Yep.
lake. And then Darnell, if you do a good finish there, that keep you in the hunt for the angler of the year. So I'll be fishing that
Uh,
tournament. You
yeah,
think so, man? You never
no,
know.
I don't, with a 30 something finish, I don't think it's going to help me. More than anything, I'm doing it because it's not very far. I mean, it's a doable drive. It's far from San Antonio, right? But still, I think I can make it in
Yeah, for you, it's
nine
a
and a
far drive.
not 9.5 hours. For a national event is not too bad. That's doable. So
I
I
usually
definitely,
leave it. That's to me the six. I'm stretching it down because I think it's 7 hours, but to me that's like the I could. I don't know
it
if I can
is.
do more than 7 hours with the gas prices now. Like
Oh yeah,
props
yeah.
to you for
I
fishing
need
that.
I need to find a gas sponsor.
I know, right? Well, Rolando, I've had you for more than an hour. I mean, first of all, congratulations once again for your win at Conroe. Much deserved, like we mentioned on the podcast. You made the sacrifices financially and with your time, personal time, just to kind of pre-fish it and get laid off the line, and it paid off for you. I know you said the check is not the most important thing, but it kind of keeps your wife a little bit happier that she would have
Yeah,
been
no,
if
it
you come
helps.
empty-handed.
Yeah,
So I know that is a factor there. So congratulations again. Look forward to meeting you in Darnell, man, and seeing what you do in Darnell. It's best of luck to you over there too. I know you punch your
yeah.
ticket, but getting another check, like I said, will kind of make it easier to swallow the expenses. So,
Nah,
um,
yeah. I
and,
just want to get out
and
there
you,
and yeah, no, that's I was gonna say I just want to get out to Dardanelle and just kind of go, head to head with those guys again, man. I like going against that competition and just,
yeah,
sharpening the skills to keep going at it.
yeah, definitely some hammers over there, and you've proven you belong on that
Hmm.
list. Anybody you want to thank? Fans, family members, sponsors who are right to take the time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I got my sponsors who are Outdoor Alphas here in San Antonio, local store, all located here off of Hebner Road. And then I also got J Rod Custom and Repairs, who does some of my specific rods, technique rods. I also got Z Pro, just got me on their pro staff team for
Nice.
batteries. There's a Z Pro lithium batteries. Those batteries, I mean, shoot, I have no complaints. Those things have lasted me all day and into the next day. So definitely quality batteries. And the fact that the owner has a degree in engineering or is very specialized in that lithium battery stuff, and he obviously is doing a good job in putting those batteries together. So definitely check those guys out. And then Kayak cushions, man. Those Kayak cushions are so comfortable, man. And I tell people, you might feel like you might not need one, but until you try one, you'll know you need one.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's it.
awesome.
Yep.
Well, Rolando, once again, thank you for taking your time being here. We definitely appreciate it. And for those out there listening, if you're gonna be on the water again, wear your PFDs. If you're gonna have a couple of beers, I can't speak English today. I don't know why. If you're gonna be on the water, have a couple of beers. Remember, just be responsible, drink responsible. Make sure you get home safe back to your loved ones. Thank you for listening. Have a great time, everybody. Peace out.
All right.